have these symposiums each year. We've been doing this maybe, I don't know now, 4 or 5 years, and it's nice to see the amount of support that you all bring to hear what we do in each of our different departments. So thanks for coming out and being part of that. I'm going to just tell you there's one more symposium this spring, and that is March 20th. And Dr. Emily Lund will be presenting. And so she's here today, so y'all come out and support her as well. I'll be sending out an invite for that again. If you want to be part of it, please just let me know. That way I can count in the food count who all will be here. So thanks for being here today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Phil Esposito from kinesiology to talk about his research. Really, this is cool because he's doing a lot of research with undergrad student populations, or undergrad students with disability populations. So I'm going to turn it over to let you talk about all this stuff you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Deb.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to try and move around a bit because I don't have a presenter in front of me, and I have to follow along. I'm going to talk a little bit about, generically it's going to be health and wellness. If I can make a brief amendment, it's not necessarily going to be wellness, it's going to be more health and function. And then reiterating what Deb said, most of the research I'll be talking about is research I've done and with all my co-investigators, all of which have been exclusively undergraduate students. So I'm particularly proud of that, and I'll try and point some of that out as I've been going through. This is my first time being at one of these in a long time. I actually teach at one, so be a bit rusty. But it worked out well. I canceled class. I gave an exam Wednesday. They're mad at me. I'm mad at them. So it's just a good time for us. But I will keep my remarks relatively short. I'm going to try and keep it in that 35-minute range because one of the research topics I will be talking about today is a physical activity program that is run out of TCU. And we have individuals coming from Crowley that meet us every Friday at 2 o'clock. So hopefully I can cut out of here, change out of this, and get ready for that. So I'll try and keep it short and then leave some time for questions, critiques, and comments at the end. I'm going to steal a little bit from a talk I saw Dr. Mitchell give a while back to some of our seniors. And he started with his research he did as a doctoral student and that natural logical progression where he is now. I'm going to emulate that if I can. Talk about the research that I did at the University of Michigan and how it's informed or laid the foundation for the stuff that I've been doing the last 3 or so years here at TCU. Most of the work I did at the University of Michigan was centered on both measurement and assessment. I did my work out of the School of Kinesiology, but most of my research was done at the University of Michigan Hospital and the health system. And a lot of the research we did was looking at measurement and assessment in clinical populations. So on the measurement aspect, we were looking at various disability groups and how we can measure health outcomes. And then the next logical step off of that was, what's the value we're assigning to this? And one of the things we're finding is in these clinical groups, the numbers we're getting are fine. The measurement tools are objective, they're good, but the value we're assigning means different things to different groups because these groups are inherently different. So that's a lot of what I did in Michigan. I'll talk about some of that research relatively quickly and then how that laid the foundation for the first couple projects I've done here at TCU. I'm not sure what your level of knowledge is with Down syndrome, so I have a few advanced organizers, so we're all working with roughly the same operational definitions moving forward. Down syndrome presently is the most common cause of chromosomal intellectual disability. And because it's chromosomal, it results in this wide array of clinical features that makes them unique from the typically developed population. When we think of Down syndrome, a lot of people think intellectual disability, but there's a variety of other physical characteristics that go along with that. If I can call your attention to a few of them, this thyroid issue is one that we'll talk a little bit about now, but the end result is what cuts across a lot of the research that I do. Because of this thyroid issue, a lot of individuals you see with Down syndrome are typically overweight. Another feature, one of the clinical features with Down syndrome is they're typically shorter in stature. So if you're looking from a big picture perspective, you have a whole group of individuals who aren't very tall and are putting a lot of mass on a frame that's not very big. And then one of the things I'll talk about today is what is that mass? How much of it is fat? How much of it is muscle? And if it's fat, what are those chronic health conditions associated with that? So that can become particularly problematic. This other one I want to call your attention to, these last two, is poor muscle tone and loose ligaments. Historically, most individuals who end up walking, most individuals in this room, or your children, started walking at 10 to 14 months. That would be a typical developmental milestone. Most individuals with Down syndrome don't start walking until 18 to 24 months. It's a pretty big delay. And one of the reasons is this poor muscle tone and loose ligaments. And if I could do a crude anatomical demonstration here, think about how the ankle joint is constructed, where you have your talus and then fibula, tibia, senior. Most of us, ligaments hold that tight, and it's stable for us. Because ligament attaches bone to bone, this is loose in those individuals. So me and you, when we take those first steps, or we're learning to stand, that's a stable surface. In individuals with Down syndrome, because that is loose, that's not a stable surface. So even just that first milestone of standing before they start walking is loose. So one of the last studies I'll talk about today is a balance training program/protocol we're implementing in the Kinderfrog program. And we have a two-pronged approach. One is specifically working on balance, and the other is working on, if you can work on strength in preschool children, is working on strength and trying to build up the integrity in those lower limbs and hopefully improve balance, and by extension, walking and other locomotor tasks. I'll spend a lot of time talking about body composition today, and specifically its importance to chronic health conditions. I want you to hold these two numbers kind of in your mind moving forward. Depending on how it's reported and how it's being done, you can see it reported anywhere between 50% and 90%. And when I say how it's being reported and how it's being collected, when we think of individuals being overweight or obese, a lot of times we think of BMI or body mass index. Body mass index is just a unit of how much mass you're carrying per unit of height. It penalizes individuals who are particularly muscular or particularly short. All of you can see me in this room. I'm clinically classified as an obese individual with a BMI of just over 30. Whereas if we're using some other indicators, percent body fat, I'm still slightly overweight, but I'm not obese. So a lot of times when I'm looking at this information, these individuals are being reported as being 90% obese, but it's because of some of these phenotypic characteristics that are penalizing them. I have a research group right now that is actively looking at, are there better indicators of chronic health conditions that measure anthropometric? So is waist circumference better? There's a research group in Philadelphia right now that has a weird algorithm specific to individuals with Down syndrome that looks at hip-waist ratio as a function of height. Our group's not there yet, but I'm going to talk about some of the stuff they're doing that they actually collected data on last weekend. I'm going to present two studies today that are only 6 days old, so hot off the press stuff right now. Most of the research that I do in this Down syndrome area is specific to measurement and assessment. Measurement tools we have on file. Looking around the room, I developing these people, I use the same tools they do. But what's different is I'm using it in a different population. So the assessments that I'm drawing, the meaning I'm attaching to things, the values I'm attaching, are different than what might be in a healthy group or healthy population. This has become such a big issue. In 2011, the CDC came out with a working document, a relatively lengthy document, looking at achieving healthy weight, reducing obesity in a variety of clinical populations. And it looked at just the stuff I've been talking to you about. The measurement tools we have are fine. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're not inventing new stuff. But we need to reconceptualize when we talk to individuals with disabilities, whether you're an educator, a practitioner, or a health professional. So I'm the clinical director for Health Promotions Texas. I oversee the health promotions throughout the state. Almost everyone that comes through that venue is overweight or obese by these BMI standards. When in actuality, this past Saturday, we took percent body fat measures, waist circumference measures. They are still overweight, the waist circumference is still pretty high, but it's not as drastic as what this BMI is telling us. And this document lays that out for a variety of developmental conditions. So individuals who report cerebral palsy, Prader-Willi, autism. It also looks at individuals who acquire disabilities as we get older. So people who are post-spinal cord injury, or people who are post-traumatic brain injury, and looks at some of the values and that interplay between measurement and assessment. This is a standard height, weight, growth chart for those of you who have children or use it in your daily life. one of the things I want to talk about is this BMI and how these short statures play out. At the bottom here, you have weight. Super shaky today. I don't know why. I don't blame it on the cold. Could be nerves. I just want to be transparent with y'all. But that's why I'm trying to hold it steady here. We have weight, age, and then we have stature up here. They're superimposed over here. Individuals with Down syndrome is what's superimposed here on these colors. I can see it okay. I'm assuming you guys can see it okay, I hope. If you're looking at weight, yeah, they track about the same, maybe a little bit high in the 95th percentile. But for the most part, those curves look more similar than dissimilar. You would agree with that assessment, yes? What becomes problematic is I told you that stature issue. We superimpose height over it. You see that even if they're 95th percentile, it's less than the 5th percentile in a healthy group. So they're putting the same amount of weight on a frame that is much, much smaller. And if you think about your own experiences when you've seen or interacted with individuals with Down syndrome, most people you see have that kind of squatty type phenotype where it's kind of boxy, shorter, typically overweight. And that's why you're seeing that. So moving to one of the studies I did with my dissertations, I wanted to explore what was happening here. Clearly BMI is not a good indicator. So I wanted to look at actual percent body fat and see what was going on in this group. I collected data on 106 individuals between the ages of 8 and 18 in the Ann Arbor, Detroit area. I want you to hold on to the age of 8 and 18 because the first study I did here at TCU actually helps extend that out in the lower range with the kinder frogs. I was able to access a group of individuals with Down syndrome ages 4 to 6. So I was able to start painting more of a longitudinal type of design. But looking at this distribution, it's a nice bell curve. Things look good. You see more people are in this healthy area. This red box superimposes individuals who are overweight or obese. Part of the problem is when you're working with individuals, I said 8 to 18. Whenever you're talking about BMI in that group, we usually think of a percentile. We compare them to individuals of the same sex and age because they're still growing. So BMI is not good. We use BMI percentile. So when we adjust for that, it shifts the curve, and almost everybody I collected out of that 106 individuals was classified as being overweight or obese by BMI. But again, that height, being short, I know, I believe is artificially penalizing these individuals, and it's not an accurate representation of some of their health risks. So I use the BODPOT of Michigan. It's a measure of getting body composition. So I was trying to see how much muscle, how much fat there was. Grabbed a group of individuals with Down syndrome. You can tell this was a few years ago where I had both more hair on my head and more hair on my face. It's the aging process. And I got measurements of percent fat, percent lean, and I wanted to see, because I was young at the time, I thought these individuals were all overweight and obese because they're super sedentary. And that was my belief going into it. This is a sedentary group of individuals. So I also wanted to measure their physical activity. And I gave them these little devices, I think I have one in my pocket here, about the size of a watch, and it measures acceleration. So the faster, if you're wearing this on the wrist or your ankle, the faster they're moving, the more vigorous or intense the activity is, and if they're just chilling out on the couch or they're sleeping, it's not moving, they're being relatively sedentary. And if you're following along on this output, you would see here, hopefully they're sleeping from the hours of midnight to 9 a.m., wake up, you see a spike in activity. I have no idea what they're doing before bed, but it is super active. What we see in bird pictures, that is from 7 p.m. to almost 8:30 or 9, and they're getting a ton of moderate and vigorous activity right before bed. So I don't know entirely what's going on here because it's 11 o'clock, we're still active at 10. Because I was under the assumption that just like most people in this room, the more active you are, the more lean you're going to be, and the more sedentary you are, the more likely you are to be overweight or obese. It seemed like an intuitive thing. Looking at the relationship between this BMI percentile and time spent in sedentary activity, there's not a relationship here, for those of you who are not stat-savvy individuals. Ideally, I would have liked to have seen some sort of line. I guess it would have been, the more sedentary you are, the more. So then I flipped it and looked at time spent in moderate to vigorous activity. These two look about the same. Well, I already told you that BMI is not a good indicator. Percent fat is probably a good indicator, right? So looking at percent fat, again, I thought I would see a linear relationship. I did not. So this is that sedentary activity, so not doing anything and how much fat they have. This is moderate to vigorous. Again, the two graphs look the same. So then taking a step back, I was like, clearly something's happening within this disability or condition, and it's not how sedentary they are, it's not how active they are. So I started kind of reconceptualizing my own thought process moving forward. Whoa, that was hot. Hot mic. So that actually brought me to TCU, where I wanted to continue that line of research. And still, that data was inconclusive. I didn't know what I was looking at. So a lot of the first studies I started here at TCU were descriptive in nature. Still trying to get a grasp on what's happening. So as I was coming up with my focus and line of research, came up with my research objectives to improve health, physical functioning within the parameters of these conditions. I've been doing this now for 4 or 5 years. Almost everyone I interact with intellectual disability or Down syndrome is obese. Those are the parameters that I'll be given. I'm working within those to improve health, so blood pressure, strength, cardiovascular function, and physical function, whether it is balance, fine motor dexterity, within those conditions of that disability. You're going to see this slide a lot today. These are some of the studies I will walk you through. Some of them are going to be more in-depth, and then some are going to be more superficial in nature. These are studies completed by some of my students who will be presenting at the Harris Research Symposium, April 15th, 16th, abstract to April 1st, 8th. I don't know. Anyway, so hopefully I can pique your interest with some of those, and you will check out those posters. But looking at that, my two focus, looking at health, looking at physical function. The first study I did here at TCU was a logical extension of what I was doing at Michigan. So I told you I had that group of individuals, 8 to 18. I measured body composition, I measured physical activity, I saw no relationship. I did the exact same thing in this kinderfrog group. And it was a perfect extension because the oldest kinderfrog group was ages 4 to 6. So added stuff to that. I did the exact same measures of physical activity. I did not have a fancy bod pod at the time. We did not have the DEXA yet, so I relied on skinfold measures. Even at that young age, these are their typically developing peers in that classroom. You see, most individuals are at a healthy weight. And then if you want to look at it, the statistic the CDC's been telling us roughly 1 in 3 individuals are overweight or obese. Awesome. If you look at the Down syndrome group, we're seeing that in that 4 to 6 range, they are already overweight and obese. The vast majority of them. Looking at BMI in its most raw form here, things look okay. But I painted the picture when we're working with this group. We use BMI percentiles, and I have them color-coded, normal weight, overweight, obese. You can see our group already is significantly different than the typically developing group, and we see a lot more individuals being overweight and obese. Laying that out in the histogram, the vast majority of these kids are already overweight and obese. So if I'm putting that together with my group, my dissertation group, almost everyone's overweight and obese. In this group of kids who are already 4, 5, 6 years old, they're already overweight and obese. I can tell you from the research that we've been doing in older individuals, most of them are overweight and obese. So clearly this is a problem. And it's difficult to identify what exactly is happening other than that Down syndrome phenotype. Because looking at physical activity, I have sedentary activity here. And then we have that health promoting moderate to vigorous activity. This 60-minute line is what we should all be achieving. Our group with Down syndrome is relatively homogeneous, definitely compared to this variability here. But as a group, they're not getting the physical activity they need. And I know they're getting a lot because it's over here at the Star Point School. They're getting at least 30 minutes at school, which means the rest of their entire day, they're not even getting 34 minutes. So when I was coming out of that, trying to piece the stuff together, I extended it out in the lower end, and I'm starting to see that it fits with what's happening in the older group. It's happening what's happening is happening with the typically developing group. Children who grow up overweight obese typically become adolescents who are overweight obese. Adolescents who are overweight obese typically become overweight adults. I tried to extend this into the older group immediately following this study. I had difficulty with recruitment. I'm actually more integrated in the disability community now than I was 3 years ago, so I think I'll have a much easier time recruiting, but I imagine we'll see the exact same thing in a group of individuals who are 18 to 40, which is kind of that next age range I'm looking to recruit from. This next study, I'm going to hop down here. I'm going to talk about this superficially. This is this was a study completed with John V. Roach honor student. She's presently in her second or third year at PT School at Texas Women's University. This next study is in progress with 2 of our students right now. All their data has been collected. We're in the process of tweezing it out. What we wanted to look at was clearly BMI is not a good indicator of what's actually happening. Percent body fat doesn't appear to be a good indicator of what's happening. We want to look at other things that are already in existence or some other hybrid like the individuals who are out at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia with their algorithm for height, weight, hip ratio. Height as a ratio to hip to waist ratio. So I brought a group of individuals with me to Special Olympics. We collected height, weight, BMI, waist circumference, skin folds, took measures of their blood pressure, and we're trying to partition that out. We had roughly 35 individuals between the ages of 35 and 65, and again, 35 to 65, the vast majority are overweight and obese. This data is only 6 days old, so we're still going through it. But we're seeing no relationship between waist circumference and systolic blood pressure, BMI, systolic blood pressure. If I were to change those out to diastolic, you'd see the same thing. If I change it out to percent body fat, you'd see the same thing. So I will spare you the next 8 graphs. But we're still seeing this cloud. It's not a good indicator right now. Hopefully by the time we present this final data at the Harris Research Symposium in April, we'll have a better grasp of what we are looking at. This next area, moving into this area of physical function, improving physical function in individuals with disabilities. This was a study I completed with another honor student. She's presently in first-year master's program for physician assisting. This was one of my first semester here, trying to get out into the community. I made a partnership with Wedgwood Academy just down the street. Generically, their mission is to serve learning different or special needs individuals. Most of the individuals who attend that school are males, somewhere on the autism spectrum. And what we're looking at is these visual supports for motor skill testing. Motor skills actually used to be one of the ways we used to describe autism. So when they were describing autism in the 1930s and 40s, they described a lot of individuals as being clumsy. We've actually moved away from that now that we know autism is more of a pervasive social disorder, with the characteristics being deficits in the social domain, communicative domain, or restricted or repetitive interests. There's actually more and more kinesiology people getting into autism, because if you think about, if those are the deficits, how we diagnose autism, social and communication, those don't start to emerge until 18 months, 24 months. But we start to see motor abnormalities earlier than that. So we start to see atypical delays in the onset of eye contact, reciprocity with laughing, giggling, rolling over. So more and more kinesic motor people are getting into autism because we can have an earlier kind of diagnostic, if that makes sense. So the UNT group is relatively active in that, so is a group at UT Southwestern. So that's how I got into motor skill testing with autism. So one of the reasons we test with motor skills is we're trying to identify if we're starting to see deficits. When we look at motor skills, we're talking about specifically locomotion and object control. Locomotion, the ability to get from one place to the other, walking, running, jumping, hopping, whatever. And then locomotor, catching, rolling, throwing, striking. These are all kids. These would be kid tasks. Part of the issue is when we're giving these motor tests to individuals with autism, it's primarily, I need you to do this. You tell them, you demonstrate it once, they do it. if they have issues in speech language and just in communication in general, that's probably not a preferred method of receiving that. There's a group of researchers down at Auburn, there's another one at Indiana State University playing with the idea of visual supports. So with visual supports, I tell you to do it, I show you a picture of what I want you to do, and then I'm going to demonstrate it. And then we set up a study looking at that, where we had two groups of individuals. One got the standard assessment, and then one had this supplement of visual supports. And we're hoping that these visual supports are more in line with their preferred learning modality and would be more reflective of their true motor skills. So we went out to Wedgwood Academy. We recruited all males. For those who don't know, autism, it's way more prevalent in males than females. It just wasn't bad saying on our part. One of the things that made our study unique is we gave all of the parents the social responsiveness scale. Social responsiveness scale is a questionnaire. It's about 100 questions, and it gauges their level of impairment. So the higher you would score on this, the more impaired an individual would be. The lower the score, the less impaired they would be. And we wanted to see that to gauge what their level of deficit is in just overall, and then specifically in the social communicative area. Half the kids had standard testing, half had picture cards. The way the study was originally designed was we had a crossover design, but we ran out of time, so we never made it to the crossover. So when we were randomizing our group, I was happy with the way the chronological age turned out. I remember this moment in time when she was sitting across from me and this came out in SPSS. What this was telling us was the individuals who were getting the standard one, the regular protocol, were less impaired. The individuals who were giving this treatment to were more impaired. And then if we're looking specifically at that social communication, which we're hoping picture cards would help with, again, the group getting this was more impaired than the group that was getting the standard testing. I was a little bit worried just because I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I would have liked to see maybe more uniformity between there, but we randomized it. It is what it is. Let's do it. Looking at our results. On this one, a higher score would indicate better performance. So our group that had the picture cards did better in locomotor tasks, and they did better in object control tasks. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. And as a natural extension of this, this was happening at the same time. I don't make a shine. We're changing things here. This was the test of gross motor development 2, was the version we were doing. Test of gross motor development 3 is presently in testing phases, and test of gross motor development 3 is going to have visual supports into it. Because at the same time we were doing this, there were people doing it at Auburn and Illinois State. We all kind of met up at a conference. The person who created TGMD2 is actually my doctoral advisor, Dr. Ulrich. He saw this as an issue and he's actually incorporated that into the testing manual. So I think that's it. If you want to see how people performed individually across tasks, I have locomotor tasks here, object control here. The group that received the supplementary picture cards are in green, and the group that received the standard testing, I tell it to you, I demonstrate it, you do it, is in blue. And then across almost every task, our green group performed better, which was, I thought, pretty nice. The last study I want to talk about with respect to physical function is another study we just completed on Saturday or Sunday, Special Olympics. And it's this test retest this Purdue pegboard and those with intellectual disability. For those not familiar, Purdue pegboard is very commonly used in occupational therapy. It's a test of fine motor skills, particularly pincer grasp and hand-eye coordination. It's a board that's set up with a variety of holes. You take a single pin out of a cup, drop it in the hole. Might not sound like a lot, but it's primarily used in individuals with motor dysfunction, so cerebral palsy, post-stroke, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, and people are like, yeah, this is not that much. You use your pincer grasp all the time. Most of you are holding pens and pencils to take notes. That's a pincer grasp task. The forks and spoons you are using to eat is a pincer grasp task. When I was putting this shirt on today, this is the bimanual pincer grasp. So it's primarily been used in those with motor dysfunction, I have 2 students who have been accepted to occupational therapy school, one at WashU, one at Belmont. They wanted to investigate this in an intellectually disabled population. So instead of a motor group. So the problem with Special Olympics, we collected that data. It looks really good. This looks really good. They got 32 people to complete both pre and post. There's a variety of tasks where they do it with the right hand, they do it with the left hand, and they do these asynchronous tasks with both right and left hand. I have an image of what it looks like. So this is one of our students here working with an adult with intellectual disability, and they are single-handedly going through the pegs and dropping them in there. This is something they will present at the Harris Research Symposium, but things came out relatively clean. I was really impressed with the results so far. I don't want to steal their shine, and actually I thought they would be here. So I've done a lot of descriptive research. And what we've described is there's this group, this population of individuals who are overweight, obese. Now it's a matter of intervening, so improving physical function. And that's where I'm at now. That's where most of my senior researchers and honor students are working, is in the area of intervention. So that's what I have here is these last 2 ones. I have 2 interventions. We went soft with this in the fall. We are live with it now. It is a physical activity training program for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. If you notice, I switched my terminology up. So I didn't say Down syndrome, it's intellectual and developmental disabilities. One of the issues I've been running into is recruitment. And I did this math last night. You can correct me on it later. It's just difficult finding enough individuals to make a study go, especially in intervention, especially if it's a clinical group. So if you're thinking there's, I did the math on the population of Tarrant County, and there's what, 17,000 births a year, and the incidence of Down syndrome is 1 in 170. In any given age band, there's roughly 100 people with Down syndrome. But then if I extrapolate that out to intellectual disability, I'm including fetal alcohol syndrome and so forth. So that's one of the reasons we've changed that definition a bit. We do still recruit individuals with Down syndrome actively, but we've broadened our group a bit. With that intervention, we have individuals coming to TCU up to 2 times a week. We have some people who will be here in about an hour, looking at least because it's her intervention. Come to TCU, we run them through a 60-minute program. Within that 60 minutes, we spend roughly 20 to 25 minutes doing cardiovascular training, roughly 20 to 25 minutes doing an individualized strength training protocol. So we've actually done 1-rep max testing on all of them, and then we just finished that last week. And now they're working off percentages, because what ended up happening was they come in and like, I did this last week, I did this last week, and I just believed them, and they were never really getting any better. But now I know, and we're pushing them a bit harder. So that's a pre-post design. We're set up to collect post data with respect to changes in strength, body composition, and cardiovascular endurance right before spring break. I don't have a lot on that because we haven't run any of those numbers yet. But what I do have numbers on is this balanced training group in the Kinder Frogs. So we went live with that intervention 2 weeks ago. That's an intervention that happened 4 times a week. They've been kind enough to let us integrate that directly into the physical education class. So in the physical education class, roughly the first 10 minutes are dedicated to us. And we're doing that 4 days a week for 6 weeks. And there's 2 groups. We have one group who is doing Nintendo Wii training. Before, oh, it's just games. It's balanced training, but it gives them both summative and formative feedback. They get to see how they're doing, so it's very individualized. And some of the activities they're doing, they look like games, but if you're mapping it back out from a physical therapy motor standpoint, they're doing postural control activities, they're working on center of pressure, a variety of other tasks. And we've integrated some of those into our traditional group. So we have static and dynamic tasks, we have postural control tasks, and then we have some symmetry tasks. We're doing right and left, legs and hands. That's more things, we're not there yet. And then that group went live a week or 2 ago, and it's about what we expected. The 2 groups were relatively equal at baseline, which I was super thankful for. Individuals without Down syndrome performed much better than their peers without. And if you're thinking, what do these numbers mean? Big picture, if I drew a line here at 40, Typically, you see it as a cutoff for people who are below 40 would be at risk for falls or clumsiness. So, so that kind of lays out where we're at with descriptive research. We're moving to intervention research. This summer, we're actually going live, combining the two interventions we have going. We'll be targeting adults with intellectual disabilities, specifically looking at balance. The two protocols, one will be just doing strength training in some of those postural control areas, lower limb strength. And then we have one group that will just be doing a traditional balance training, working on postural control, and then both static tasks and kind of more dynamic tasks. Dynamic moving your center of mass outside of your base of support. So generically, take it home. Almost everything we've been doing is addressing these disparities we have with the ultimate goal of improving health, or even if we're not improving, we're doing that now with the interventions. I'm still trying to better understand it. I haven't wrapped my head around it all the way yet. I have teamed up with a group of nurses from mental health, mental retardation in Tarrant County, and we've been going back and forth, just kind of coming up with targeted interventions and just new ways of thinking about these problems, reconceptualizing them. As I come to a close, I'm going to thank my Kinderfrog group, because they helped me. That was the first study I ever did, and then I do something with them every year, so that makes me happy. Mental health, mental retardation, Tarrant County. When I first got here, the hardest part of getting into a clinical population is you're a stranger, they don't know you. It's taken me a lot of time to build up goodwill in these groups. But now that I've done that, recruitment's been much easier. I'm a familiar face, so it's easier to go into these group homes or these communities to interact with care providers. Whereas before, I was an outsider, it was very, very difficult to get any numbers. Special Olympics has been a big help. I've actually, as the clinical director, I've actually been using Special Olympics venues to collect data at, and that's been nice because just this weekend we saw 2,800 or 2,500 athletes were there. Roughly 125 came through our venue, and of those 125, 30 to 40 completed some form of research study, whether it was the body composition one or the one. That's been relatively fruitful. I call it the Esposito family. I wasn't called my lab group, but someone in my lab group yesterday described being a member of my lab, I don't know if it's good or bad, as being in the mafia. So I like it and I want to run with it. So I want to thank the Esposito family. Some of which you will hear. I don't tell you enough, and I will extend this to both Brooke and Anthony. Thank you. I appreciate you. I know I'm definitely not the easiest to work with, but that's a thank you to you all. Tell people who weren't here that happened. The Harris Research Group, I want to thank Deb for putting these on. Sorry I can't go to more of these. We'll just teach you one. But then I also want to thank you and do a public PSA here. The money that's been set aside for undergrad research has been amazing. My students have been the beneficiary of that twice now. And it's one of those things I think that makes TCU super unique, is I was at a professional conference in the fall. There was only 2 undergrads there. There was roughly 800 conference participants. And the fact that one of the 2 was ours, and people were coming up to me and her and asking why she was at the poster competition. It's because there wasn't an undergrad thing. And they're like, oh, you should have entered it anyway. It's something I'm really proud of. I'm glad that money is available. I just think it's unique to go to a professional conference, and there's just not a lot of undergrads there. So I've been fortunate enough to work with some talented undergrads. And it's nice to have that money there as an incentive to, if you're not garbage, you can take this research elsewhere. You all have heard enough from me. I guess I'm going to open the floor up now for questions, comments, and critiques. Or not, because I do have the intervention to go to.
I was just curious, you talked about 2 of your core goals being health and physical function outcomes. And now that you're kind of in that intervention phase, are you going to try to address the quality of life outcome? Like what's important to your patient population? And are there instruments out there to measure quality of life in your population? I know you're dealing with a wide age group.
And that's actually one of the things that we're trying to be sensitive to parents' needs and caregiver needs. and a parent had actually come to me and asked a question like, so we're dealing with adults. I would say most of the adults we deal with are younger adults. They are between the ages, I would say, 25 and 35, 25 and 40. And a lot of the parents are asking questions about quality of life. And then that next extension, or kind of in that, is independence. I'm not there. There are instruments. I don't necessarily like any of them, because one of the issues you run into with a group that has intellectual disabilities is how much do you trust the responses they're giving you? And then if you're going off parent or caregiver report, how much of that is accurately reflecting their, whoever they're caring for, quality of life.
So you're gonna start developing your own?
I don't, but I have a very talented student who might. Dr. Watts.
You had mentioned that some of the balance or standing issues in Down syndrome are related to the structural joints at the ankle. So I know in acquired conditions, when there are cerebellum pathways that are injured, it creates reduced tone, low tone, hypotonicity, which I think is what's going on with tone in Down syndrome.
You do see hypertonia?
Hypo, yeah. So I'm wondering how much of the balance and the standing issues might be related to cerebellar function. Do we know much about cerebellar function in this population?
In reading, we do see that. But then going back to it, so if you do have these issues, you still want to work to improve that balance from kind of a musculoskeletal perspective. And where we're at now, and even if you were to kind of look around at the variability of individuals who are trying to do interventions, there's not a lot of consistency with addressing balance from a correct perspective. I don't think I really answered your question.
Well, it was basically how much of the balance issue is related to cerebellar function, if at all.
I don't have a good answer for that. Sorry.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I know a lot of it's musculoskeletal, because if anyone's interacted with the kinder frog, or you've seen individuals, a lot of them wear the ankle foot orthotics, and that's designed to create a bit of rigidity there. But again, that doesn't really get at the core function of the system. Wish I had it, Kevin.
To thank all of you for being here, and remember that there is another research symposium in April. We go to physiology there. Does anyone have any final announcements? Happy Valentine's Day to all. Although, Stephanie, tell me about your this is my favorite Valentine's party idea.
I have a friend who's having a housewarming party, she and her husband, but it's Cupid is Stupid party.
Cupid is good.
So no.
Y'all have a great weekend.
For those of you that hate Valentine's Day.